A frightened young boy ran out crying to a garbage collector, desperately pointing toward his house. Just minutes later, police cars swarmed the block and shut down the entire street. What the terrified child revealed to the garbage man would turn an ordinary trash pickup into something far darker, uncovering a hidden nightmare that had been festering behind closed doors in the heart of a quiet American neighborhood on BUP Stories. Joe Harris had been working the same sanitation route in Maplewood, New Jersey for over a decade. Every Tuesday and Friday without fail, he rolled his city-issued garbage truck through the winding suburban streets just after 8 a.m. rain or shine. He knew every crack in the pavement, every family dog who barked at the sound of his engine, and nearly every house on Sycamore Lane by the color of its shutters. Joe wasn't just the garbage man, at least not in his eyes. He was part of the community's rhythm, showing up like clockwork, offering a nod or a wave to the early risers, returning kids' soccer balls when they'd roll into the street. He saw things, quiet things, changes in routine, the patterns people tried to hide. Trash told stories, and Joe had learned how to read them without judgment. That morning was colder than usual, with the kind of biting wind that rustled through mailboxes and blew half-empty cans down the sidewalk. Joe's partner, Raul, had called out sick with the flu, so he was working the truck alone. It made the route slower, but Joe didn't mind the solitude. In fact, there was something peaceful about the engine's hum and the reliable clang of metal bins. He was already 30 minutes behind schedule when he pulled up in front of House 213, a white colonial with green trim at the end of Sycamore. He knew the house well. It belonged to Stephanie Daniels, a single mother who worked long shifts at St. Joseph's Hospital, and her quiet 9-year-old son, Eli. Joe had seen the boy grow from a chubby toddler who liked to wave at the truck to a lanky kid who rarely smiled. As Joe lifted the bin from the curb, he heard the front door creak open. He glanced up casually, expecting to see Stephanie heading to work or maybe Eli waiting for the school bus. But instead, he saw something that froze him mid-motion. Eli bolted out the door in socks. No coat, no backpack, just a red hoodie and terror in his eyes. His cheeks were flushed, streaked with tears. He wasn't running for the bus. He was running for his life. Before Joe could react, the boy had reached him and flung himself into Joe's arms, gripping his pant leg like a drowning man grabbing driftwood. "Please," Eli sobbed. "Don't let him take her. Please, Mr. Joe, he's hurting my mom." Joe knelt immediately, the bin forgotten. "Hey, Eli. Who's hurting her?" The boy pointed back at the house, shaking violently. "Todd, he came back last night. Mom said he was drunk again. He hit her this morning. He locked the door. She screamed and told me to run." Joe's breath caught. He knew that name, Todd Mercer. He'd seen him once or twice, always in a suit too nice for the block, always looking like he thought he was better than the neighborhood. Joe had noticed the bruises on Stephanie once a few months back when she'd come out late for the trash, mumbling something about tripping on the porch. He'd believed her. Or maybe he'd chosen not to push. But now there was no denying it. The panic in Eli's voice cut through the cold like a siren. Joe pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "This is Joe Harris. I'm at 213, Sycamore Lane. A child just ran out crying. He says his mother is being attacked inside the house. It's urgent. Please send officers immediately." The dispatcher's voice was calm and focused, guiding him through the questions. Joe gave them everything he could: names, address, what Eli had told him. All while the boy clung to his arm, trembling like a leaf. By the time Joe ended the call, the distant wail of sirens was already rising in the distance. "Eli, you did the right thing, kid," Joe whispered. "You're safe now, and we're going to make sure your mama is, too." The boy didn't answer. He just nodded, wiping his face with the sleeve of his hoodie, eyes glued to the house where he'd left his world behind from BUP stories. Within 5 minutes, the peaceful rhythm of Sycamore Lane shattered. Red and blue lights danced against the bare trees as patrol cars pulled in from both ends of the block. Neighbors peeked through curtains. A few even stepped out onto their lawns with coffee cups in hand, their faces tightening with concern. A woman in a Navy uniform, Sergeant Monroe, stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was in her early 50s, silver threads streaking her black hair, her expression sharp and no-nonsense. She knelt beside Eli. "I'm Sergeant Monroe, sweetheart. Can you tell me who's inside the house?" Eli sniffled. "Todd Mercer, my mom's boyfriend. He drinks a lot. He hurts her when he's mad." Monroe nodded and rose quickly, speaking into her shoulder. Mic officers moved in formation, one slipping around the back, others approaching the front cautiously. Joe stood to the side with Eli, feeling helpless, his hands clenched at his sides. He was just a garbage man. This wasn't his job. But still, he couldn't walk away. Then came the sound. A woman screamed loud, sharp, and desperate, followed by the unmistakable crash of something heavy, glass or furniture hitting the floor. Monroe raised her hand. "Go!" Officers surged forward. The door was forced open. Inside, chaos erupted, yelling, movement, more shouting. Joe held Eli close as the boy covered his ears. And then, relief. 2 officers emerged supporting Stephanie Daniels. Her lip was split, her eye already swelling shut. Her sweater hung off one shoulder, torn. Her wrist was bent at an odd angle. She looked broken, but alive. Right behind her, officers dragged out Todd Mercer in handcuffs, his face twisted with defiance. "She's lying," he shouted to no one in particular. "She's always making up stories. You people don't know what really happened." Joe didn't move, but in his mind he whispered, "We do now." Todd Mercer's shouting echoed across Sycamore Lane, but no one was listening anymore. His expensive dress shirt was untucked, his face flushed, and his bravado was unraveling with every passing second. 2 officers flanked him, their grips firm as they marched him toward the cruiser. Stephanie stood unsteady on her feet, her face swollen, bruises blooming down her jawline like dark petals. Her right wrist looked broken, swollen badly beneath her sweater sleeve. Eli ran to her, burying his face into her stomach as she winced from the touch, but wrapped her left arm around him instinctively. Joe hovered nearby, unsure if his presence was welcome, but unable to walk away. Stephanie looked at him through one good eye. "You stayed," she whispered. Joe nodded, his voice gravelly. "Wasn't about to leave you too." Officers quickly called for paramedics. One arrived within minutes and began tending to Stephanie on the porch, carefully examining her wrist and eye, asking if she'd lost consciousness. She answered quietly, always looking back at Eli as if making sure he was still there. Sergeant Monroe approached Joe and pulled out a small notepad. "We'll need a statement from you, Mr. Harris." What you saw, what the boy told you, anything relevant. Joe nodded and recounted everything: Eli running out, the cry for help, the call to 911. When Monroe asked about his familiarity with the family, Joe added gently, "I'd been on this route for over 10 years. I see these folks more than my own brother. I may not know what happens behind closed doors, but I knew something wasn't right today." Confirmed it. The sergeant gave a small nod of respect. "You did the right thing. A lot of people wouldn't have." A second officer approached. "Ma'am, the boy mentioned a grandparent nearby. Says they just came back from there this morning." Monroe turned to Stephanie. "Is that true? Your mother? Where is she?" Stephanie looked up, eyes wide. "She's just 4 blocks over on Chestnut Avenue. We left there around 7 this morning. She was the one who helped me hide our passports." Joe's brow furrowed. "Passports?" Stephanie's voice trembled. "Todd was planning to take Eli out of the country. Said he had a business contact in Dubai. I told him no, that I wouldn't let him take my son away. That's when he snapped. He started drinking again. That's why we went to my mother's, to hide the documents to buy time." Monroe's face hardened. "Is it possible he might head to your mother's now?" "Yes," Stephanie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was yelling about it earlier. Said he'd rip it out of her wrinkled hands if she didn't give them back." Monroe turned instantly to her radio. Within seconds, officers were dispatched toward Chestnut Avenue. The street, once filled with neighbors peeking out through curtains, had grown still. The buzz of a helicopter in the distance added a surreal tone to the morning. Eli hadn't left his mother's side. When paramedics helped Stephanie into the ambulance, the boy looked panicked. Joe crouched next to him. "They're just going to help her, buddy. You'll see her soon." Eli's lip trembled. "Can I go with her?" "We'll follow behind," Monroe offered gently. "Your mom needs some treatment first, then you can be with her at the station." As Joe helped Eli into the backseat of the patrol car, he caught the boy's hand in his own. "You're the bravest kid I've ever met," he said. "You did the hardest thing a kid could do today, and you saved her." Eli didn't answer, but the grip on Joe's hand tightened slightly. The convoy of police cruisers and one ambulance headed off toward town. Joe returned to his truck, his route half finished, his uniform stained with salt and tears. He climbed into the cab and sat still for a long moment, hands on the wheel, mind spinning. Just as he was about to pull away, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his dispatcher. "We've had some missed pickup calls from Sycamore and Jefferson. You okay out there?" Joe stared at the message, then at the street in his side mirror, now littered with shoe prints, broken glass, and the ghost of what had happened. He typed back quickly, helping with a domestic call. "We'll finish pickups as soon as possible. Might be late." No reply. He set the phone down and started the engine from BUP Stories. An hour passed before he made it to the police station. He parked his truck in the rear lot beside a row of impounded vehicles. As he stepped out, he noticed the dark blue Lexus parked by the entrance. Todd Mercer's car, recognizable by the dented bumper Joe had seen once before. Inside, the station buzzed with quiet urgency. Officers moved in and out of rooms. Phones rang. Voices rose and fell. Joe was guided to an interview room where a detective introduced himself as Detective Raymond Kessler, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a calm voice. Joe repeated his story again, this time on record, every detail from the moment Eli appeared to the arrival of the police. Kessler took careful notes, nodding occasionally. "We believe Mr. Mercer had connections overseas," the detective said. "There were electronic tickets on his laptop. He was trying to leave the country with the boy next week." Joe exhaled slowly. "If that kid hadn't run out this morning," Kessler nodded, "you probably saved both their lives. You did good, Mr. Harris." In the waiting area, Joe saw Stephanie seated on a bench, her wrist wrapped, a bandage under her eye, a warm coat draped over her shoulders. Eli sat beside her, head resting on her good arm. Joe approached quietly. Stephanie looked up. "You again," she said, her voice rough but warmer now. Joe rubbed the back of his neck. "Just wanted to make sure you two were okay. I'll get out of your hair after this." She shook her head. "No, stay. Please." Eli looked up and managed a faint smile. "Are you going to be our garbage man forever?" Joe chuckled. "That's the plan, kid. Unless you fire me." Stephanie laughed, a hoarse, real laugh. And it was the first time Joe had seen her smile. "You were late today," she said suddenly. "You're never late." Joe nodded. "Yeah, partner called in sick. Had to take a different truck. Slowed me down." Her smile faded a bit, but her eyes stayed locked on his. "Maybe you were meant to be late." Joe sat beside them, his large frame taking up most of the remaining space on the bench. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The station noises blurred in the background. It was just the three of them, Eli clinging to warmth, Stephanie healing quietly, Joe sitting with the weight of what had nearly happened still pressing down on him. The ride home from the police station wasn't something any of them expected. It wasn't in the back of a squad car or with an official escort, but in Joe's city garbage truck. After giving their statements and finishing the paperwork, Stephanie sat with her mother, who had been picked up safely at her home by the officers dispatched earlier. The danger was past, but the trauma still hung in the air like fog. When the suggestion came up about how to get them back to the house on Sycamore Lane, there was no cab waiting, no family van left intact. Stephanie had barely any belongings with her, no purse, no house keys, just the coat from the hospital and her son holding her hand. Joe stepped forward and offered quietly, "I could drive you home in the truck if you don't mind the smell." He smiled awkwardly, expecting them to decline, but Stephanie surprised him by nodding. "Honestly, after today, I don't care what it smells like. I just want to get home." Eli grinned, a flicker of boyish excitement sparking in his eyes for the first time all day. "You mean we get to ride in the front?" Joe opened the door. "Front seat's all yours, partner." They climbed into the cab, Stephanie sitting between Joe and her son, while her mother, Mrs. Evelyn Daniels, took the fold-down jump seat behind them. It was cramped and smelled faintly of hydraulic fluid, old banana peels, and city streets. But to them, it felt like sanctuary. As Joe started the engine, the rumble of the truck came to life, steady and dependable. They pulled out of the station lot with the sun beginning to lower behind the buildings, casting a golden hue across Maplewood. Inside the cab, Eli peppered Joe with questions: how fast the compactor worked, what was the heaviest thing he ever had to lift, whether he'd ever found anything weird. Joe answered patiently, his deep voice full of dry humor. Once found a wedding dress in the trash with the tag still on it. No idea what happened there, but I hope the groom ran faster than me. Stephanie sat quietly during most of the ride, her head leaning gently against the passenger window, her body clearly sore, but her face relaxed for the first time. She didn't say much, but her silence was different now, less guarded, more restful. Evelyn watched her daughter from the seat behind, her lips pressed together in a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Occasionally, she'd glance at Joe, studying him as if he were a piece of the puzzle she hadn't expected. When they pulled onto Sycamore Lane, the street was quiet again, just as it had been that morning. The broken glass had been swept away, and the cruiser that once blocked the corner was gone. Still, the echoes of what happened there lingered in the air. As the garbage truck came to a halt in front of house 213, Joe hopped down and opened the door for them. Eli jumped out first, followed by Evelyn, then Stephanie, slower now, careful with every step. Joe offered his hand as she descended. She took it without hesitation, her fingers curling around his, her grip stronger than he expected. When her feet hit the ground, she didn't let go immediately. "You know," she said, her voice soft. "People drive past this house all the time, mow their lawns, walk their dogs. I've smiled at them, waved like nothing was wrong, but you stopped." Joe's voice caught in his throat. He wasn't used to praise, especially not the kind that came from places of pain. He looked down at his boots, then back up. "I didn't stop because I knew what to do. I stopped because I didn't know how to walk away." They entered the house together. The front door had been fixed temporarily with a board and latch, and police tape still hung loosely across the frame. Inside, the living room had been tidied, but the damage was clear: cracks in the wall, a broken lamp, dried blood near the edge of the couch. Stephanie paused at the threshold, her shoulders tensing. Evelyn placed a hand on her back. "I'll make tea," she said, guiding her daughter to sit down while she disappeared into the kitchen. Joe lingered at the door, unsure whether to stay or go. Eli tugged at his sleeve. "Are you coming in?" Joe looked towards Stephanie. She gave a small nod, so he stepped inside slowly, almost reverently, as if entering a sacred place. He sat on the armrest of a chair near the window, quietly surveying the room. A photo lay on the floor: Stephanie, Eli, and Todd smiling on a beach lawn before things went bad. Joe picked it up, dusted it off, and set it face down on the side table. Stephanie saw and nodded again, appreciative. Evelyn returned with 4 mugs, setting them down gently on the table. The smell of chamomile drifted through the air, comforting in its simplicity. They drank in silence for a moment before Stephanie spoke again. "They're keeping Todd overnight. They'll process the charges tomorrow: domestic battery, child endangerment, attempted abduction. They're adding DUI since he tried to drive away drunk with me in the car." Joe said nothing, but his hand gripped the mug tighter. "Do you think he'll actually go to jail?" Eli asked, his voice hesitant, almost afraid of the answer. Stephanie exhaled. "He has money. He has lawyers. But I have something I didn't have before." She reached out, wrapping an arm around Eli. "I have people who saw, people who listened." Her eyes flicked toward Joe. "And that matters now." The sun dipped lower, painting the walls in amber and copper. Eli yawned. Evelyn suggested he go lie down. And after a reluctant glance at Joe, he finally relented. Stephanie stood and walked Joe to the door. Outside, the air was crisp and quiet, the world going about its evening routines as if nothing had happened. She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, the bruises on her face already darkening. "You know the last man who stood in that spot? He said he'd destroy me if I ever embarrassed him." Joe's eyebrows lifted. "And here I am, garbage man in your doorway. What would the neighbors say?" Stephanie smiled, a wry glint in her eye. "Let them say what they want. You picked up more than trash today, Joe. You picked up pieces of a broken family." He chuckled, then grew quiet. "You going to be okay?" She nodded, not as an automatic response, but slowly with certainty. "Yes, we'll heal. Not overnight, but we will." "And you? What about your job?" Joe shrugged. "Dispatcher's still waiting for my report. I may get written up, maybe worse, but I'd make the same call again." Stephanie looked at him for a long moment, then stepped forward and gave him a hug, gentle, careful, but real. "You ever want to stop by again?" she whispered. "You don't have to wait until trash day." Joe smiled as he walked back to his truck, climbing in just as the street lamps flickered on. As he drove away, the empty bins rattled softly in the back. But his heart was full that day. He hadn't just collected garbage. He'd collected courage, truth, and something deeper, a quiet kind of heroism that didn't wear badges or demand attention. Just a man doing his job and stopping when it mattered from BUP stories.